The other aspect is that Jung identifies the anima as the anima mundi as well, which is the soul of the world. Now, what he's pointing at is that mother, the motherly aspect of the soul, of the anima, is matter. In other words, it's the material universe that we experience because it's the one that takes care of us. It's the one that builds our body through nourishment and gives us sustenance. And so the mother becomes the world. In other words, the soul, the anima, becomes the physical world for us.
So it's the sensations, like when we think about the passion and the love, all that is like sensations. And then also the physical world is that extension of that sensation, how we sense the world and the material and life that we bring, like starting a business or having a baby or, creating a project, a creative project. They're all a part of that creative process. Hello, welcome to another episode of Soul Sessions. I'm Debra Maldonado.
And I'm Dr. Rob.
And we are so excited to continue our series on the hero's journey. And before we begin with today's episode, where we begin the initiation, which is where really the meat of the hero's journey begins, I do want to remind you, if you're listening to us on a podcast service, please subscribe to Soul Sessions so you get every episode of this amazing series. And if you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to click subscribe and notifications so you can be alerted for every new episode that we create.
That's right.
So let's do a little review. We last left the Dark Night, the belly of the whale, and I see that Rob is appropriately dressed for the occasion.
I was dressed for the occasion. Yeah, so the Campbell's work is about this calling that we have as human beings to go on a journey. And the journey, of course, is not an external one. There are external components to it, but it's an internal journey, a call to adventure that we resist initially. The hero in the myths resists the call because he or she knows this is the end of their childhood, the end of their innocence, the end of their life in the village or amongst the people. They have to set off on their own. And this is a difficult task, so there's always resistance. But as they heed the call, as they find the courage to go on that adventure, one of the first challenges is to cross over the threshold where there's no return anymore. And they find supernatural aids, they find allies, they find ways to protect themselves, to arm themselves for that journey.
And when we talk about this, I do want to say that we're talking about the internal journey, as Jung called the process of individuation. And we watch movies and we see stories played out in literature and myths, and they talk about the external journey of the hero. But what most people don't realize, or maybe they don't understand or really get, not most people, some people, is that the real journey is within. The hero transforms through the trials and through the changes. And that's why we want to invite challenges into our life. The challenges aren't there to hurt us or something that we have to fix. It's like they're there to help call to a higher level of being.
Yes.
And so that's really what this series is about, really that internal journey. But we're going to be talking about some, things that happen in the outside world because we still need to function in the world. Yeah. But the real gold is inside.
Absolutely. And these do not necessarily go in the sequence that we're going to present them. People experience these components or these phases of the work at different times in their life, depending on where they start and who they are, what age they start the process as well.
But also, don't they go through it more than once?
People will go around and continue to go through these phases as they go through their journey.
Yeah.
But one of them is, we know, the dark night of the soul. A lot of us have experienced those dark aspects of being a human being that just take us to those dark places of the psyche. And that's the dark night of the soul. And this is also why this work is so important. If we don't have a map, if we don't have a template for what is happening in our psyche, we simply think we're depressed. We simply think I failed. We simply believe what the external world tells us, that we're not good enough, that we're not functioning, we're not doing what we're meant to be doing. And that is really one of the primary functions of mythology and the ritualistic structure, as well as the individuation process, is that it gives us a template for this inner transformation.
And that template is really important because I know when I first started on my exploration, it was almost like I was playing whack-a-mole with whatever showed up. I got to fix this part. And there was no like path I was going on. And I felt like I was digging a lot of shallow holes and not really going deep into the journey or understanding that these challenges were there to take me somewhere versus I need to get rid of this feeling or I need to get rid of this terrible situation or this barrier or this block I have to clear it to get somewhere externally. If I knew that, I mean, I get, eventually I got there, but it's just a warning to those people that want to fix their life or feel like something's wrong. It's like, follow the journey, follow this map to understand where you are. So you don't feel that there's something wrong with you. You realize this is the journey we were meant to be on. So we talked about the departure. I want to get into the initiation. So we talked about the departure and it has the 5 phases. In the last episode, we talked about the call to adventure and the refusal of the call, which go together. And some people stay in that phase for most of their life. They have this, maybe when they're 10, they have this idea they want to do something amazing in their life. And then they don't do it until they're 40 or 50. And then the supernatural aid, which is a guide or mentor that comes in, and then crossing that threshold. And then we left with the belly of the whale, which is that dark night. And I do want to mention too, Rob, or ask you to explain a little more about the dark night not being so, it doesn't have to be depression. It doesn't have to be dark and scary. It's more that we come to like the things in our life aren't working anymore. And we have to face the things we haven't faced. And sometimes it's not just the things that we don't like about ourselves. Like when we're going to talk about shadow work and initiation, but it's all the greatness that we have. It's like coming to terms with that part of ourselves too.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would say it's dark from the perspective of the persona and the ego. From the individual's perspective, it becomes dark because they appear to have lost their way. They lost the path, right? And all of a sudden, like Dante says, in the middle of my life, I found myself in the strange woods that I didn't recognize. I was lost. That being lost is an important phase of the work. But if we don't understand what's happening, we think I'm really lost. I'm lost. I lost my way and I can't find myself or that path.
Yeah, I love that idea. Let me just underscore what you just said, is that feeling lost isn't wrong. It's actually, you should feel lost. If you're building up your persona most of your life and living for the ego and for the external and for success and having great relationships and all those things that we want in life, but if that's all we have, eventually we're going to feel lost because none of those things can fully satisfy our soul. And so it really makes us, I always find that those points in our life where we are lost is when we really start to ask deeper questions.
Yeah.
So we're going to go into the initiation.
Right before the initiation, in Campbell's formulation, the belly of the whale is a symbolic death and rebirth. There's a biblical story of Noah getting eaten. Is it Noah or
Jonah?
Jonah getting swallowed up by the whale because he's refusing the call. He refuses to do God's will, and therefore he has to go on this journey, and he gets thrown overboard, and it ends up in the belly of the whale, but then is spit out on shore. So it's a rebirth from the old self. Then the initiation begins.
And we're going to do initiation because there's so much in 2 parts. So we're going to do the first part on the initiation, which is, it kind of goes hand in hand with the belly of the whale. When you get you kind of go through that like dark kind of lost feeling, then you have almost like set on a new direction. Is this when you start really moving in a new direction?
Yeah, because at this point, there's no turning back.
Point of no return.
Yes. The worst has happened already. You've lost yourself and you've lost what you built up as ego, as persona.
It's like you can't go back there again. Like you can't, all the things that you built up, you can't, like if you lose a corporate job and you're a big executive and then you lost it all or lost your company or something, it's like, I can't go back there. So where do I go?
That's it.
And so the road to trials is the first part.
Yeah, and initiation in the individuation process, we can think of it as the integration of the shadow, that we confront the dark aspects of ourselves and we start to accept that those are part of us as well.
And shadow work, I love that we say that, because a lot of people think shadow work is the end. They just do the shadow work, and I've done my shadow work, but that's just the first stage, and it's the initiation into a bigger creative process.
Yes. And then we go into the road of trials.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a series of tests, a series of ordeals, tasks that we have to perform in order to reestablish our sense of self. If we don't do that, that's when we get stuck, or we feel that we're stuck, that we're not moving forward.
Is this kind of like where the hero, is training as a warrior, and he has his mentor and he's learning how to fight with the swords, or the guru teaching the student how to meditate and how to deal with life. So and then they have to go through some trials, almost the guru gives them an initiation to see if they're ready for the bigger work, because they need to kind of transform the ego in a way, and that's identification with the ego. That's where what really happens during the road of trials.
Yes, we see it in the inner work. Once we integrate the shadow, then the question becomes, well, if we are free from our past, if we're not beholden to our conditioning, then who are we and what are we here to create? Those are the tasks. In other words, there's going to be a vacuum, an emptiness, if we don't find our way of accepting the challenge of creating something new.
And those tasks prepare us. If we don't face those challenges, I see this in when I worked in the entertainment industry, these one-hit wonders. They were really young, and then they got this fame, but they didn't go through the normal trials of like kind of the blood, sweat, and tears that you have to do to become famous. When you get there, it's worth it. And they just kind of sat, but they haven't matured into a person who has that success. And we see this in a lot of ways of people who make a lot of money really quick, and then they just haven't matured and work through developing themselves in order to have those things. When you have a goal and you want to create something new in your life, you have to prepare your psyche for receiving it. You can't just get the external thing and think it's going to change you. You have to change first in order to receive it, or you're going to destroy what you created. So the road to trials is very important, and we should embrace them.
Absolutely. And it's almost a tragedy when people succeed without testing themselves, because then it's come too easy. And like you say, that it becomes destructive for them. And they have to destroy it because they feel intuitively that they're trapped by their external circumstances. So you see people,
they're so externalized, right? That's where all their power is, in the external.
Yes. So you see people like Tiger Woods,
Mm-hmm.
from very early on built up huge success with the help of the father, but it wasn't his, and he didn't undergo the inner challenge of transformation. And therefore, he understood intuitively that it was all fake, that it was trapping him, and he had to find a way to destroy it. And people think, it appears from the outside as if he's wrecking his life needlessly because of drugs or sexual addiction. But it was really that the inner calling demands that you start the process on a genuine footing, that you do it for yourself.
And that's when we're in line with a deeper purpose, an inner purpose, it feels so much, it's more rewarding when you do get that outer result, because doesn't define you.
Yeah.
You define it.
Yeah.
So they go through these trials, they challenge the hero, and the hero develops inner strength. And then the next stage, which I think is still a sort of a trial, but it's the meeting of the goddess. So let's talk about that.
The meeting of the goddess, this is a huge one. In the individuation process, it corresponds to the integration of the anima, soul, as Jung calls it. And it includes the mother archetype as well. In other words, the feminine principle, the principle of creativity of the world, of really being in the world in a creative way now. That's a huge challenge for a human being. And it's both male and female, that men and women that have to confront this aspect of being in the world.
So in like a practical state, what would that be in like someone who, let's say, is starting a business, or they're coach and they're starting a coaching business? Where would this fall into? They kind of connect with their purpose at that point? Like they're finding the love and the passion for what they want to do, or an entrepreneur who wants to, create success, but they connect with that love of what they do, or or the meaning that they want to put to it.
All of the above. It is finding your purpose within yourself, not in the external job or career or external success.
So it's the heart, basically, of your purpose, a feeling tone of your purpose, not an intellectual, but more like a passion.
Yes. And we see it with people whose parents pressure them to become a lawyer or a doctor or an accountant, whatever it is. They have that need to break away from that because it's not theirs. It was given to them. It was handed to them as part of their persona, and therefore it doesn't do the trick. It doesn't give them their true purpose. And they feel it intuitively, but often they don't understand what's going on. They think, oh, I have to hate my parents and rebel against them because they forced me to do this. Nobody forced you. You kind of
You made that decision. Like, no one can make you do anything. And it feels like coercion or something, but it's still no one can make you do anything. Yeah.
So the meeting of the goddess is confronting all that.
It's like meeting your soul in a way, like meeting the soulfulness of yourself, the
Finding,
tenderness. And sometimes you can't get it until you go through that dark night, because you have to become like almost like less hardened of a persona, and you really like almost like the soft chewy center we always talk about of our soul. It's not weak. It's actually this part that's like been hidden within us.
and it's very much tied to relationships because it's love. It's your ability to connect to another human being in a genuine way. If you're not doing your purpose, you can't really do that because
So
you're
it's like
not yourself.
finding what you love, doing what you love.
Doing what you love, yeah. I mean, it sounds corny, but it is finding your genuine passion for what you need to be doing in the world. So it's really important for relationship, because if you don't know who you are, there's no way you can find your perfect match.
So you make, instead of making rational decisions on and I think it's really important. Yeah, you don't make the rational decisions, but I also think it's really important to connect with that love or that passion, because what is going to drive you to continue on this journey? Like, your intellect and your rational mind is not going to say, come on, do something meaningful. You have to get in touch with that deeper sense. And the difference between this level of feeling and then the feeling before shadow work is what? Like, I would say it's less ego driven and it's more pure.
Yeah, because at this phase of the work, you're not limited to understanding yourself as ego persona. Now you understand it. You're in a bigger game. You're in a cosmic play that is way beyond the formulation of the social aspect of the persona. The persona, the personality is simply about who are you as part of your family, who are you as part of society, who are you in the work setting. All that is important. We have to do those things, but Jung says that's not the aim of life. The aim of life is to go inward and find that true passion within yourself.
And we hide that, don't we? Because it makes us do irrational things. Like when you fall in love or you pursue a dream that does not make any rational sense, but to the soul, it's like, I have to do this.
That's the breaking away from the village, from the tribe, because if you cannot break away from the family system, you're always tied through that umbilical cord, the psychological umbilical cord, to your mother and to the family and to the culture.
Yeah.
And you can't grow.
And we've suppressed this passion most of our life because we need to fit in with society, and there's no space for dreams. Most of our parents did not pursue their dreams. If you did, you're probably more encouraged than people who haven't. And then it's just kind of, our dreams are asleep. And through this, like this kind of feeling lost, it's how powerful that is to go from that lost feeling to be found and finding, who you are inside and what you're passionate about. That's worth it's like priceless to have that. So we have the road to trials. Through those trials, we find our passion, because we have to dig in to find something that's going to get us through those trials. So we meet the goddess. And then the last part of the first stage is woman as a temptress. And so this is where distraction, attachment, and seduction try to take us off the path. So it's almost like another trial in a way, because now we found what we're passionate about. We work through some of the ego stuff, ego barriers and attachments, but now there's this, we're playing a bigger game. So the bigger the game, the bigger the challenges.
Yes, because we're no longer in the realm of personality.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the collective unconscious, as Jung calls it. The collective unconscious means that we're dealing with archetypal forces.
And can you just clarify that we're no longer in personality for people that are new to this work and may not get
Yeah,
what you're
so
saying?
the personal is very simple. It's everything you experience as an individual, your family, your relationship with your parents, your relationship with your siblings, your school, your peers. Those things are unique to your personal experience. The archetypes are collective. You know, we were watching a rabbit this morning in the backyard. That rabbit had a mother, just like I had a mother. In other words, it's a universal archetype that we're dealing with the mother archetype.
So what we're saying is that we have Jung says we have two parts of our unconscious, personal and collective. So the personal is all the conditioning responses from our personal life. And the second phase of individuation is dealing with like the anima animus, which is the collective, which is what we have in common with all humanity. So we have these two templates that we're kind of in a way, because an organizing principle basically of our psyche. And if we didn't have this, we'd be just kind of all over the place and not have any structure to our experience. So it's good to have, but also when we understand the framework, we can make choices outside of it.
Yes. So now we can think of this anima as the feminine principle, but as an archetype. People often get lost in the individual aspects of it. There is
Personality or
something to that, of course, but Jung emphasizes that the archetypes are part of the collective unconscious, which means that they contain the opposites. So just
dual.
the dual nature, just as the soul is beautiful, creative, inspiring, it has the dark side, not as evil, but as the opposite of how we think of it from the individual perspective. That it also contains challenges. It also contains the difficult aspects of being in the world, being in the physical world. Of relationships are going to test us and take us to dark places. Love is not only beautiful flowers and romance, that it also is pain and suffering. And the integration of those two things, Jung says, or the being able to hold the opposites at once and be mature enough to understand that when I fall in love, when I find my passion, it also entails that I'm going to have to deal with those dark elements of the archetype.
So it's like a balancing act. Like if you want love, guess what? It comes with this. You can't just have love and everything perfect and everything align all the time. It's going to come with, I mean, a very simple example. You fall in love with someone, you have a wonderful life with them. One of you is going to die first, which is I was like a Debbie Downer over here, but that's the dark side of love. Would we not want to have that experience because eventually we're going to grieve this person? No, we would want that experience, but it does come with a price. Like everything comes with kind of its opposite. So when you think about passion and love and beauty, we can often get attached to it. And so that's what I would say is the dark side of these qualities is the attachment to, like, I found my purpose and I'm going to go out and, write, books and be a writer and express my creativity. And the dark side of that is being attached to having people buy the books, having people like the books, having other people see your passion and recognize your passion, because the ego will try to have that dark side. And then if things don't work out when you pursue your passion, what's the opposite of that? And so it's about balancing it. So you're not so blinded by your passion that it almost like keeps you honest in a way. You're not blinded by that so much attachment that you get lost in it.
Yes. And internally, what that balance does, it allows you to pursue your passion without being attached to it, like you said. In other words, you're not depending on your external work and your relationship with your spouse or your mate to give you everything from the external. You're finding that inner connection, that inner balance within yourself, which then makes you a complete human being. Because if you're depending on externals to give you those things, you're lopsided. You're giving your power away. And therefore, you're powerless in a lot of ways. What happens when those things go away? What happens when those things disappoint you? You're lost. You're back to being a child again. Maturity comes through the integration of these larger archetypes. And in the hero's journey, often that meant that the hero is tempted by the dark elements of the archetype. So we see Odysseus being lost on an island where the queen seduces him with drugs and with sex, and he forgets his journey. He starts to forget about his real purpose, which was to get back to Ithaca and his wife. And that's psychologically, that's what the myth is talking about. That if we get tempted or disappointed or seduced by these darker elements of the archetypes, we're lost. We forget our true purpose.
Well, I think, you see this in documentaries all the time of these gurus, the spiritual gurus, that they identify, it's like they over-identify with their teacher or the spiritual, wisdom that they have. And it almost like turns dark. The Buddhist guy who was now had all this controversy, the sweat guy with the yoga, Bikram yoga, a lot of, these people that, they're doing this kind of I want to be a guru and I want to be successful, but they haven't done the inner work. They haven't faced their shadow. And so they get caught up in that fame and that adoration from their followers. And then it becomes cult-like, and then they end up hurting people and hurting themselves, and a lot of times sabotaging their business. And so this is so important that when these things show up, they're not to hurt us. They're to say, hey, this is another test. You want to keep going on this journey. You want to survive and take your journey all the way to the end. These things are going to tempt you. And so they'll become in the form of criticism, people criticizing you, or people not being happy with what you offer, or trying to discredit you, whatever it is. You're going to face those challenges, and then you see how you respond to it. And a lot of people think it's like a curse, and I have to, clear something in me to not let this happen. Instead, we can look at it and say, how am I so attached to this persona that I'm building? We all have to build a persona as a teacher or guide, for those of you who are coaches or want to do this type of enlightenment work. But we have to be humble too. And we have to understand that that's not us. That's not the persona that's acting. It's the divine self. And so there's practices you can do to balance that, but also doing your shadow work, and then this whole anima integration. And can I just say one more thing? Because the woman has a lot to do with the mother, is that a lot of times, I know that a lot of women that do personal development work or share that or teach, coaches, therapists, there's the mother archetype that comes to play in this anima. And it's almost that if their mother wasn't nurturing to them, they feel like they have to overcompensate and be the mother for these people. And then they end up getting exhausted and burnt out. And this could happen in the corporate world too. You want to be an overgiver. And so it's about having that balance again. It's not about being this selfless person that's always giving and not worried about themselves because you want to help the world, but it's about having that balance again. So you're not identifying that it's me that's doing all this wonderful giving and power.
Yeah, that is the richness of these archetypes.
Mm.
The other aspect is that Jung identifies the anima as the anima mundi as well, which is the soul of the world. Now, what he's pointing at is that mother, the motherly aspect of the soul, of the anima, is matter. In other words, it's the material universe that we experience, because it's the one that takes care of us. It's the one that builds our body through nourishment and gives us sustenance. And so the mother becomes the world. In other words, the soul, the anima, becomes the physical world for us.
So it's the sensations, like when we think about the passion and the love, all that is like sensations. And then also the physical world is that extension of that sensation, how we sense the world and
Yes.
and the material and life that we bring, like starting a business or having a baby or, creating a project, a creative project. They're all a part of that creative process.
Yes. So psychologically, if we're not integrated, or that we haven't integrated the anima, we haven't come to terms with the world, and we're always at odds with it. There's something off. We can't seem to find our place. We can't seem to be comfortable in the world because there's always something pushing back or prompting us to experience it in a different way. And that is part of the inner work. We cannot do it by changing careers, by moving to another city, by changing relationships. It has to be done internally. That's the individuation process. The integration of the anima is so important because it gives us that connection to the world in a very direct way.
And in a way, if you think about the mother, it's the world, like when we were born, like our mother's body before we were born was the kind of our world to us in the womb. And then we are now in this bigger womb. And we unconsciously, the relationship with our mother unconsciously gets reflected in the world. Is the world kind to me? Is the world taking care of me? Does the world give me what I need? Sustenance, nurturing. If it doesn't, then there's an anima issue. It's not about just keeping boundaries and finding other people to hang out with instead of toxic people, or finding, like you said, doing those external changes. You can do those, but you have to check in first. Is like, where am I? What am I seeing? What am I experiencing in the world? And what is my inner world telling me about the world that's giving me these kind of experiences or making me perceive these experiences? A lot of times we experience the world in a very distorted way, where I remember I worked at a corporate job once where everyone hated me when I first started because I took a job from one of their friends. And so they didn't even know me, but they were just like kind of rude to me and not nice and kind. But I just, in my mind, I said, I know who I am. I know that I'm a good person. I know once they get to know me, they're going to love me. And soon enough, I created that. Or I could have see the world's against me, and I could have made it a terrible experience for me. So it really is, we have the power to change our experience in the world by changing our inner world and the perspective of what's happening. So that's just a good example of feeling nurtured by the world, feeling the world is there for us when we need it. We're getting everything we need from the world. And it's a friendly place and warm and full of love, which is a challenge for a lot of people right now. But it's like, how do I cultivate that right now? If we're carrying hate and disdain for the world and it's falling apart, we're going to keep seeing all the things that reinforce that. And I'm not saying don't dismiss and, ignore what's happening, but we have to say, where's the good in the world? Where's the light in the world? Look for the helpers. That's what Mr. Rogers said. Whenever there's a tragedy, look for the helpers, and you see who's doing good, and that reinforces your faith in humanity and faith in your own humanity. So I think that's a good point. So we're going to go through this trial. We're going to meet the goddess, the anima. We're going to have the dark side of the anima coming through. And then next week, we're going to talk about dear old dad, the atonement with the father, and then kind of shifting and ending, going through that initiation period. So thank you, Rob, for all your great insights today. And please don't forget to subscribe. And we will see you next week on The Hero's Journey Continued.
See you soon.
Take care.